Hello and welcome to the birth of a new dimension. My name is Aurora, and for the next hour I will be speaking to you about how to add an additional dimension and an additional degree of freedom to both your energy field, your consciousness, your genes, and the planet upon which you stand. So first of all, Birth of a New Dimension, that is the name of this show, and I've named it that because I'm speaking about the concepts that are necessary to embrace or understand on a basic foundation level as preparation for the new dimension that is created by the seamless coming together of the worlds of spirit and matter. We could call them the formerly discrete realms, and we can also say the word spirit may be interchanged with the words pure energy or consciousness or time or possibilities and probabilities or wishes and dreams or the interior realm. Now, the tool or the methodology for bringing together these two formerly discrete realms is something that I invented. It's a shape called the flying rainbow lasagna. And I didn't invent it in the way that people here on Earth invent things, like sitting down and writing in a sketchbook or something like that. I invented it as an action, as part of the experience of coming into this physical body as a walk-in. So now I have to tell you a little bit about my background. My name is Aurora. I'm a walk-in. I'm a galactic walk-in. So that means that I am not the original grower of this physical body. I didn't help this body to grow in the womb and be born and be nourished through early childhood and through the teenage years into adulthood. I didn't do any of that. So this body vehicle, this is like a hand-me-down or a home that someone else moved out of, and I moved into that home. And the portal through which I performed this transference of consciousness is called the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. And I created it. I'm the first person that ever performed this energetic dance movement, and I did it in order not to die. That is like the basic answer to why I created this. There are times when one simply spontaneously creates or simply creates out of joy. This was creation out of pragmatism, a practical need. So there was a practical need not to die. And we could say that it is, the analogy would be like if you were on a road is shaped like a line. A line is one-dimensional, and it's just going, and it's going to go off a cliff unless you do something. And if you create another dimension, like a line next to that line, you can turn right or you can turn left on the flat piece of paper. Instead of going off the edge of the cliff, you have a place to go. That is what I did with consciousness. So consciousness was going to end. And I describe this pictorially, maybe I could say it better graphically. I use words on the radio once a week in order to paint a picture with my voice, but most of the time I paint and draw and make diagrams in order to draw what this looks like. And it's a lot easier for me to depict than it is for me to describe with words. So I consistently draw this diagram that I call the time vortex. It is shaped like the cross-section of a funnel. The funnel has the fat part at the bottom and the skinny part at the top. And the edge, the curved edge of the funnel, the membrane that separates the inside from the outside, is the flowing membrane of death. And remember, I'm talking on this broadcast all about the flying rainbow lasagna as an energetic movement that dissolves membranes without actually breaking them. And dissolves is not a good word. It's not like a sugar cube dissolving in a glass of water. It is more like something that becomes permeable when something once was not permeable, when it was like solid. So what I'm really speaking about here is time. And I know I'm jumping around a little bit in my presentation here, but science right now in the 21st century describes time as an ever-expanding bubble. That science imagines there was a big bang, a spontaneous explosion of super dense coalesced matter and energy that spontaneously decided to expand outward and create the world that we see around us, the world of particles and forces and physics, solid matter and energy. And it took a long time for all of this to shake out of chaos and form some amount of organization. And that on this expanding bubble, science describes our consciousness as inhabiting the surface of the bubble, which is the present moment now. And if we were to, quote unquote, look back over our shoulders, we would look into the interior of the bubble, and that would be the past. And if we went to the center of the bubble, like, the center of the gumdrop, that would be where the Big Bang occurred. But science does not recognize anything outside of that membrane of the present moment now. So science has created, and all of this creation, it is mental creation. It is the creation of ideas. It is the creation of belief systems. It is the creation of how you look at the world or your description of reality. So the description of reality says there's the present moment now, and that is a barrier between the past and the future. And that means that everybody who has lived in the past, we can't talk to them. And everybody who has yet to exist in the future, we also cannot interact with. So science also does not formally even recognize in this graphic depiction of time that the future exists. What science has described is kind of like a bubble floating in a non-contextual environment. And when I speak about adding an additional dimension and adding an additional degree of freedom, what I'm talking about is placing that bubble of time in a context. So that's like taking that bubble and placing it in a box or in a room. And once we place the bubble of time in a room, it has something relative to move to. And, that's not a very grammatical sentence. You must excuse me. The point is that there are walls and a context, and we can now move that bubble of time up and down, or we can hold the bubble of time in one place and move the room up and down. And what that does is add an additional degree of freedom. That is the equivalent of drawing a line on a piece of paper, reaching the edge of the piece of paper, and instead of going off the edge of the cliff or ending your trajectory of consciousness, turning left or right. Turning left or right would be like adding an additional dimension. So I am talking about practical information that you, as an individual, can apply to your own trajectory of consciousness in order to not die. And also practical information for the entire planet and planetary noosphere to be able to not die. And here I'm defining die or death as the condition of consciousness when you are no longer able to conform to the harmonic pattern of energy as it flows in the cosmos. So if you take the time to look at my artwork, you can go to flyingrainbowlasagne.com, or you can check out the Twitter feed for Birth of a New Dimension. That's at Birth Dimension. And you can also find that on the UCY TV homepage for FRL. If you check out my artwork, when you look at these repeating patterns, you have to understand that is the harmonic pattern of energy or consciousness as it flows in the cosmos. It's the pattern of time and timelines. It's the pattern of thoughts and ideas. It's the pattern of energetic metabolism. Just like in your body, if your blood is flowing in the correct patterns, you stay, quote unquote, alive. If your blood does not flow in those prescribed patterns, for example, if you open up your jugular vein and all of the blood, instead of flowing to your brain, flows outward onto the floor, then you are not conforming to the harmonic pattern of energy as it flows in the cosmos, and you die. Okay? We're talking now about death as an abstraction. Death is not a personification, like a grim reaper with a scythe that wants to personally cut you down and ruin your life. No. Death is a force, an impersonal force like gravity. And if you do the right things, quote unquote, with your energy and your body and your consciousness, you don't die. And if you do, quote unquote, the wrong things, then you die. And it is not punishment or something that you experience because you are bad or wrong or evil. It's like saying you played the game or tried the puzzle and you did not effectively solve the puzzle. The Flying Rainbow Lasagna is the solution to the puzzle of death. And so now I have to go back and describe a little bit about how our bodies were originally intended to be used. I've said many times before on other broadcasts, death is aberrant, an aberration, a thing that should not exist. And truly our bodies were created, and I'm speaking our human bodies on the physical planet Earth were originally created and designed to have total health, total vitality, non-decrepitude as we move chronologically through time, and due to the capacity to endlessly cellularly regenerate, and the capacity to see and avoid the membrane of death by controlling our trajectory of consciousness through time using our higher faculties. And I define the higher faculties as unconditional love, which is at the level of your heart, your chest, and above. So that is also your throat, which is the level of communication or truth, your brow, which is the level of pure insight or wisdom unclothed with words, and your crown, which is your connection to higher consciousness or the divine or the source. Those are your higher faculties. They make up like a type of organ of perception, similar to your eyes and ears. You use your eyes and ears to perceive the physical realm, use your higher faculties to perceive the higher dimensional realm. When humans don't have their higher faculties online, it means the only way they can tell if the membrane of death is there is by literally bumping into it with their nose. And that is not a very effective way to go through life, exploring every single possible iteration of your life. And here, iteration, I am referring to a possible combination of thought, belief, and action. And this is like what I say, it is a puzzle. Like if you have 3 letters, A, B, and C, you can put them together into different combinations. AAA, BBB, CCC, ABA, ACA, BAA, BCA. And those are called the iterations, the possible combinations. So there are a finite number of possible combinations of what can happen in your personal life, your personal incarnation. So this is very similar to the beautiful movie Groundhog's Day with Bill Murray. It's a funny movie. It's also profound. And it is the idea of reincarnation within one lifespan. In the movie, it happens over the course of one 24-hour period where the main character must continually die at the end of the day and be reborn in the morning and repeat the day, but he maintains continuity of consciousness. So he remembers what he's learned the day before, and he builds upon that foundation of consciousness in order to grow as a person. This is what we are all doing within our individuated time vortexes. There's the far periphery where you have short timelines, and those are timelines where you died pretty much right after you were born. Maybe you died of infectious disease, or you died because you choked on your own saliva, or you died because someone dropped you on your head. But whatever happened, like you were born and you died a minute later. And then you had to circulate back to the beginning and reassemble your consciousness and start a new timeline and experience it again. And these are the various iterations of your life. And the idea is that we are submerged within a refinery of consciousness. And the refinery, just like the character in Groundhog's Day, is helping us to learn and grow and become in alignment with our core values, or the values of who we really are as people and as consciousness. So as we go through the refinement process more and more, we find out, I am really this loving person. I am really this person who is connected to source, or this is how I really act when I am connected to the source of all love and consciousness, as opposed to this is who I'm really not. This is the way that I act when I'm totally distorted. This is the way that I act when I don't get enough food, enough love, enough money, enough opportunities. Like, those are the distortions of your personal personality. So if you're a little tiny child and you're never given any nourishment, you die. You don't get a chance to grow to adulthood. If you're a little tiny child and you're kept in a cave and never given certain vitamins, you develop rickets. Your bones can't grow. You don't develop. So if you're on a timeline right now where your body is healthy and you're listening to this broadcast, congratulations, because you've made it to whatever chronological age you. All of those other timelines where you either were smashed to pieces in a car accident, or died of pathogenic disease, or murdered by a psychopath, you avoided all of those iterations, or those iterations are happening on the periphery. So here's a good way to think about it. Just as in the retina of your eye, the system of visual perception in your regular physical eyeball, there's the fovea, which is the focal point where most of your attention is focused, and then there's the periphery, your peripheral vision, where your focus is not on the periphery. That is where you see movements and things that are happening on the edge and that you're not really looking at. So in your life, there are timelines that you are focused on with your awareness, that you are experiencing on as your focal point, and there are timelines that are in your periphery, and those timelines are not what you are focusing on. So as we go through this process of refinement, we learn to focus our awareness on the central timelines, the core possibilities. Those are possibilities that help your consciousness to extend further and further into the future, as opposed to hit the membrane of death. And when your higher faculties are activated, it's easy to see in which direction these consciousness trajectories lie, because you can see them. You can perceive both energetically and with your feelings. You can, both see and feel. It's like driving in your car. You can see through the windscreen where the road is going, and you can also feel with your tires that you're driving in the right direction. And right now, most people are trying to do this. They're trying to control their trajectory through life. They're trying to choose the right spouse or mate or partner. They're trying to choose the right opportunity to earn income and daily activities. However, most people do not see clearly and are very much at the mercy or at the whim of larger currents of energy and events, because they are not necessarily fully in control of the steering wheel of their consciousness. So now let's talk about what affects the steering wheel of consciousness. It's not just what arises internally, it is also what comes from quote-unquote external sources, other people, society, and other thought forms that are not currently other forms of consciousness or entities that are not within you. So this is understanding that, I've said this before, you're in divine co-creative partnership with the world around you. So we come here, we are born into the physical realm, we are artists, and we are collaborative artists, or we are musicians. We are collaborative musicians, because we have to learn how to make the notes that are already in existence fit with the notes that we need to play. So we need to harmonize. And this is the whole idea of your consciousness must conform to the harmonic patterns of energy as it flows in the cosmos. If you think the right things and you behave in the right way, you will be on the right timelines. You will literally be shaped in the right way, so that you can continue your trajectory of consciousness and not have to quote-unquote end your song. So you get to keep going and keep playing your song when you play the right notes. And I've been using this analogy consistently for the past couple of weeks. The science experiment where you take a group of different metronomes, the little ticking timekeepers for musicians, and the metronomes are all ticking at different rates, and you place them on a surface like a table. And the wooden table transfers the vibrations from the feet of the different metronomes to one another. So they're all connected, even though they're individuals, they're all sitting on the same table, and that makes them connected. And the ones that are ticking faster give off a little bit of energy to the ones that are ticking slower, and if you let them just continue their rhythms, eventually all of the metronomes are synchronized. They have all become equalized in their energy pattern. So when we are born into the world, we are singing a particular song or vibrating at a particular frequency. These are your genes. Your genes are literally vibrating strings like a musical instrument. And that is totally appropriate. Each one of us is unique. You're supposed to be unique, and you are allowed to be here. This is cosmic ethics or interdimensional ethics 101. Am I allowed to be here? Yes, you are allowed to be here. Am I allowed to do stuff? Yes, you are allowed to do stuff. This is, people sometimes grapple with this. If I'm a loving person, am I allowed to have an impact in the world? Am I allowed to eat food? Am I allowed to have an impact on other people's lives? The answer is yes. It is why you are here. You were not made as a musician in the symphony to simply be silent and not have an impact. So once you accept that you were created to make music and to have an impact, you now need to look at the type of impact you are having on other people and on the planet and on other consciousnesses, because we are all like the metronomes affecting one another. So now I'm going to talk about myself a little bit. I don't always go into my own personal story here. I describe myself as a galactic walk-in. I'm a totally new and unique rhythm or beat that's being played on the metronome. So the metronome is the physical body. Physical body used to be, working at a different frequency. It had a different musician playing the body, and that musician was killed. She died. And I came into this body. So I'm a new musician, and I'm making the metronome vibrate at a very particular frequency. And I am affecting everyone else with this very particular frequency. So I came into this body in 2001, right? The previous occupant died, and I came in through the portal called the Flying Rainbow Lasagne. That portal that I created, it changed the shape of my DNA, my genes, changed the shape of my non-physical energy field. So your non-physical energy field, this is the people call it the light body, but it's not made of light as in the light that we perceive with our physical eyes. It's made of light in terms of consciousness. It is made of pure possibilities and probabilities. So you right now are submerged within a sea of vibration, and your personal energy field of vibration is shaped like a torus. It mirrors the shape of Earth's magnetosphere, the magnetic envelope that surrounds our planet and protects her from cosmic debris. It's the same shape as the heliosphere, which is the magnetic envelope that envelops our entire solar system and protects us from, cosmic debris and allows organic life to be sheltered and to develop on the inner rocky planets. And it's the same shape as the galaxy itself. The shape of the energy field surrounding a black hole is also that of a torus, or it is a toroidal or donut-shaped energy field. So each one of the energy centers of your own body, or chakras from Sanskrit meaning spinning wheel, within your energy field, you are divided into 7 subsets of energy, and those smaller energy centers are called chakras. There's one for every color of the rainbow. It's why I speak about becoming a full spectrum human, and each one of your chakras is shaped like a donut. So when I spoke about the time bubble earlier in this broadcast, you could imagine that the time bubble is being dimpled by giant fingers. Like imagine God's fingers are taking a giant stretchy beach ball and dimpling it by pressing into the top and the bottom. And that is making this donut shape. And the issue with the donut shape is that we still have the discrete membrane separating the inside from the outside. Even though we've twisted the ball of time into a donut, what we still have is inside versus outside. And this is duality. And I am really here on my mission to heal duality. Duality is programmed in on such a profound level of the physical, biological vehicle here. You have your right eye and your left eye. And your perception of physical reality is created by calculating the differences between the two eyes. Thing versus thing. It's the definition of duality. And you've been programmed to have an ego, which is where you say the individual versus the world, or the inside versus the outside. I first create the membrane of my ego. I define myself, and then I say everything that's inside of me is me, and everything that's outside of me is not me. It's kind of like creating the cell membrane, and it's analogous in terms of evolutionary biology to the idea that once there was just a giant pile of goo, cytoplasm, just a lot of amino acids and chemicals and stuff that was going on, and that at a certain point, some of the goo created a cell membrane and separated itself from the rest of the goo, and it said, I'm me, and you're not me, and I only take care of what's inside of me, and I don't take care of what's outside of me, or there's different rules for what's inside as opposed to what's outside. And this is the idea of duality. And we brought this in the human realm all the way up to cognition and the idea of good versus evil, and many competing ideologies, like Christianity versus Judaism, or Judaism versus Islam. This is dualism programmed in on a biological level and bubbling up through culture and being presented as the world that we presently see. The flying rainbow lasagna is a shape that overcomes duality. It solves duality. And it does that by placing the toroidal donut shape in a context and adding an additional degree of freedom. So if I take that bubble of time or the donut shape and I place it in a room and I either move the donut shape up and down very fast or keep the donut in one place and move the room up and down around it very fast, the shape that it ends up making is the flying rainbow lasagna shape. If you don't know what a flying rainbow lasagna is and can't imagine, you can do a couple of things. You can go to my website and you can check out my flying rainbow lasagna page. You can look at the ucy.tv FRL homepage banner. There's a picture of it there. You can go to my YouTube channel and look at the conception of the flying rainbow lasagna original animation. All of these are excellent ways to look at and be essentially lasagnified. If you've never seen or been exposed to this idea, exposing yourself to this idea is the beginning of the process of changing on a profound level. Because whenever we ingest new ideas, our trajectory of consciousness changes. That's why I usually warn people. I usually say, if you don't want to change your DNA into the shape of a flying rainbow lasagna, don't listen to my broadcasts or don't look at my artwork. Because, full disclosure, like if you expose yourself to these ideas and these concepts and this energy, it's gonna start an avalanche of change inside of you. And so this is also the idea of epigenetics. Brief pause. Epigenetics is science's word to speak about this. It means the code that rules the code, and it's the idea that identical twins have identical genes, but they don't develop identical diseases, and their diseases don't manifest identically because they don't have identical thought and emotional patterns. So your thought and emotional patterns have a great deal of impact on the behavior of your genes. I know I'm talking about creating a new dimension and what happens with that. I need to go a little bit into the actual technology of studying genes for us to talk about more about this. So right now, the way that science studies genes, it takes genetic material and it pretty much puts it in a blender and pulverizes it. Snips, it's like taking a sweater, like a Christmas Snoopy sweater, that's a picture of Snoopy the dog on the front of it, and pulling one thread and unfurling the entire sweater. And then chopping up all of the yarn into tiny little bits and pulverizing it in a blender and then separating out all of the bits according to their color or their chemical structure. And you can say, this sweater contained this much red, this much green, this much white, this much black. But what this method of analyzing DNA cannot tell you is what the original picture of the sweater looked like, what the meaning, the cultural significance of Snoopy was, or essentially what the behavior of the yarn was like when it was knitted together. So DNA, when it is alive inside of your cells, not when it's pulverized and blended up and chopped up into bits in a scientific laboratory, it's dancing, it's moving. It is literally a vibrating string, just like, well, this is my electric piano. But it has recorded sounds that are recorded from a physical piano that has physical vibrating strings. Or you can imagine a violin or a piano, a guitar rather. You could imagine any stringed instrument. That is what your DNA is like. So inside of each one of the cells of your body, in the cell nucleus, most of the time, your DNA is like a sweater that's unfurled, but instead of being chopped up into bits, like in a DNA laboratory, all of those strings are vibrating. And they're not static. They are moving and shifting and being twisted together and being untwisted, and it literally makes a song. So you have individual genes, you're unique, but if you're an identical twin, you're not that unique, but the way you play your instrument is unique. So you could have the same exact violin as your identical twin, but you might be playing bluegrass music and they might be playing Mozart, and it has a different impact on the overall health of the vehicle where you are going, all right? So now we have to understand that science in its present format doesn't really perceive DNA yet And part of that is because it doesn't have the instrumentation to do so. Science really needs to invent a camera that can look at DNA while it's dancing in its tiny little, microscopic movements and begin to understand. And so I'm speaking to you about this because the format, like the shape of DNA, has everything to do with what you are experiencing in your day-to-day experience. DNA, beyond creating what the color of your eyes are, or how large your feet are, or other physical characteristics of your body. Science says DNA creates physical characteristics of your body. It does so much more than that. It also creates events in your life. So I said you have a toroidal energy field around you and these chakras, these energy centers that are made of timelines. You are in a bubble of time, possibilities and probabilities that are around you like a cloud, and you are submerged within a sea of time, a sea of possibilities and probabilities. So when I said before, you come here as an artist or as a musician, and you are submerged within this symphony, and someone else has already played these notes. And then you have to figure out, well, what are the notes that fit with that you can play? And that's the challenge here, because you don't come into a non-contextual blank canvas where you can simply paint whatever you want and it'll look good. You're coming into a work in progress. All of these events of history already exist, and you need to weave the tapestry of your own consciousness and life and behavior and events into the existing tapestry. And if you don't, it's called death. If you're like, no, I'm a punk rock anarchist, I refuse to conform, I'm going to do what I want to do, it's like squash. You hit the membrane of death. So this is, in my earthly persona, I very much agree that be an individualist, be a punk rock anarchist, don't let anyone else tell you what to do, find your own path. And in our journey in the refinery of consciousness, what we begin to learn is that fighting against the conformity of consciousness of the higher dimension, it is not efficacious. You're fighting against truth, and I'm talking about empirical truth, like I spoke about this on other broadcasts. Why do present humans build their homes in cubes with 90-degree angles? And the answer is because it works, because the roof holds up, because the walls hold up, because these angles are stable. And with consciousness, you can conform to these patterns of consciousness because they are stable, because they don't degrade, because they lead to continued consciousness trajectory. That is what it means. So I spoke before about my personal journey. I'm doing my personal journey here. I came into this physical body, and that the flying rainbow lasagna maneuver was the way to do it without physically dying or without ending the continuity of my consciousness, my trajectory of consciousness. So if we had a flat piece of paper, that's a two-dimensional object, and if we fold it, we are adding another dimension. We're creating a three-dimensional object. It's the difference between drawing a picture of a frog on a piece of flat paper as opposed to taking that flat piece of paper and folding it into an actual origami frog. So the flying rainbow lasagna is an energetic dance movement that you can apply to your DNA to fold it into the next higher dimension and unlock the image that your sweater is supposed to look like. So I spoke before, I said, science is exploring the genetic sweater, quote unquote. It doesn't even know what the picture looks like because it can't tell that the Snoopy is on there. It can only tell how much white or how much black or how much red is in the sweater. Well, the way your genetic book is read, it matters what words are next to what other words. This matters. This is like creating meaning or interpretation out of context. So in previous broadcasts, I've said that with the flying rainbow lasagna, it doesn't matter what your original book, quote unquote, is, as long as it contains all 26 letters of the English alphabet and you have the capacity to erase what you don't want and write in what you do want, you can theoretically rearrange any book into a masterpiece. You can take the 2004 Chevy Malibu Handbook for Instructions for Use, and you can rearrange it into James Joyce's Ulysses, if you have the capacity to erase what you do not wish to be there and multiply and reproduce what you do wish to be there. So this is all about how to rearrange the letters of your genetic code to say what you want them to say, as opposed to having it be dictated to you by previous generations and the present belief system and mental programming. So when genes were discovered in the mid-20th century, it started belief system and programming of genetic fatalism. Humans were taught these are what your genes are shaped like and they never change. And if you have a disease written in your genes, it's going to manifest in your life. That was a belief system. It's not factual. It's actually erroneous, because now science has done more research, refined its understanding of genes, now understands that your thoughts and your emotions and your behavior throughout your life has a huge impact on your genes. The next level of understanding that needs to be achieved is to see that genes are expressions of events that I like to call them they are the bridge of light between the world of pure possibility and probability and the actual world of experienced events that we have here. And to understand that genes are a tool or a method that has been developed or created for transmitting information through time. In the same way that written language or hieroglyphics is a technological invention that people created in order to preserve information in one generation and pass it along through time to future people, the same thing is happening with genes. So the areas of the sweater that science is not able to perceive, the significance of that, once this puzzle is solved and unlocked, you begin to see that there's information encoded within the genetic structure that has to do with where we have come from and what we have experienced in the past. And I've been speaking to you over this broadcast about how the flying rainbow lasagna dissolves boundaries, and the boundary that is most prevalent to dissolve that has been created for humans right now is the boundary of time, the past versus the future. And the huge change that is occurring is with the flying rainbow lasagna, it is possible to now seamlessly integrate the consciousness of the past with the present and the consciousness of the future. It's very, very challenging to speak about. I usually use pictures to draw it because that helps to give a foundation of understanding. Time is a very slippery concept for most people. They need to visualize it to really understand it. But let's say that right now you only have access to the information of whoever is alive concurrently at the same time as you. And that means that if there's some crucial life-changing idea or an idea that will change the trajectory of your consciousness, and if it is not present here on the planet right now, then you would not have access to it. What if the concept or the thought that you need to know about was something that someone knew about 3,000 years ago? Well, with the flying rainbow lasagna, what you can do is actually connect to that consciousness of 3,000 years ago. Or maybe the thought you need hasn't even been thought yet. It might not be thought until maybe 30,000 years in the future. The flying rainbow lasagna allows you to connect with that thought in the future. And the way you do it is by folding space and time. So we're no longer living in the sense of linear time. Brief pause here. Okay, linear time means you wake up in the morning, you have breakfast, then you have lunch, then you have dinner, then you go to sleep at night. It's very similar to an ant or an inchworm. These are animals that have to crawl along the whole stem, the whole leaf, in order to get to the flower that's all the way at the top of the plant. And they can't just jump or fly directly from the ground to the flower at the top of the plant. They have to crawl in a linear way, up the stem, across the leaf, and over to the flower. That is really different than a butterfly. The butterfly is the adult winged form. It has reached a new level of maturation because it has gone through an inner transformation, or like a morphogenesis, and it literally had to grow new organs in order to reach the next higher dimensional state. But butterflies do not have to crawl all the way up the stem and the leaf to get to the flower. They go from flower directly to flower. So this would be like saying in your life, you don't have to wake up in the morning, have breakfast, have lunch, and then have dinner, and then go to sleep. You can wake up in the morning and jump directly to dinner. Then you can jump to dinner of the next day. Then you can jump to dinner of 200 years in the future. Your life becomes very, very different. And when I'm talking about this type of flitting about through time, please do not be literal. Please do not imagine physical movement of your physical body and matter through time. It is not necessary. If all you need is information or interaction with consciousness in order to change your life trajectory, for example, you need an idea. You don't need like a ham sandwich. If you need an idea, you can get that idea from talking to someone. You don't need physical matter to change your trajectory. So it then becomes possible to get these ideas, these life-changing ideas, from a variety of sources and maintain continuity of consciousness. And this is different than what has been going on up until this point, where there has been a separation of the past and the future. Now, this also matters in terms of contacting beings that do not live on Earth or other star creatures or stellar presences, because if you had to experience information that traveled in a linear sense across the vast interstellar distances of our galaxy, when the source broadcasts, or if the information is sent from the galactic center or from a far distant star, by the time that literal physical energy has the capacity to reach our planet on the outskirts of the galaxy, not only would thousands or millions of years have passed, it might no longer be relevant. The culture that it was originally here might not be here. It might have transformed. This is about, like, if I say to you, hey, send me that hammer over there so I can hammer in this nail, and it takes 3 billion years for you to hear my request to send me that hammer. Like, that is not practical to get things done. And that those limitations about time and space are part of what has kept humanity from effectively communicating with other areas of the galaxy. So, birth of a new dimension. This is the new freedom that is coming from blending together the pure worlds of spirit and the worlds of matter. So we need to be prepared for this. If you are speaking with beings that are from a far different star system, in order to have any kind of a conversation without huge time lag, you're both going to have to be doing some consciousness time traveling. And so in order to have a fluid conversation that remains relevant, all of us are going to have to be folding space and time, and I add in the element of consciousness. So Einsteinian, physics talks about the fabric of time and space. I call it the fabric of time, space, and consciousness, because that level of consciousness and awareness is part of the energetic metabolism of the entity that we are experiencing. And when I talk about now the flying rainbow lasagna adding an additional degree of freedom, we are now able to embroider across time in new and interesting ways. So like I said, maybe the crucial concept that you need in your life, someone had 3,000 years ago. That concept does not have to be lost to time. If you can use the flying rainbow lasagna to fold time, space, and consciousness, and the shape of your DNA into a new format, you can contact that consciousness that existed 3,000 years ago. It didn't only exist 3,000 years ago, it exists in a higher dimensional state right now, concurrent to this time. So we begin to achieve greater degrees of freedom. Like a little ant no longer has to walk across the entire length of the stem and the leaf to get to the flower, go from flower to flower. This is going to radically change consciousness on the surface of Earth and other places too, because I usually say Earth surface humans. There are other forms of consciousness that live in other discrete realms connected to Earth, that Earth surface humans will now be able to meet and interact with. Now, you can ask the question, Aurora, will we be able to share ham sandwiches with them? Like, this will be interactive on the level of physical matter? And I'm telling you that will become much less relevant. The need to share physical matter will become a lot less relevant because we will have a different form of economy that is much more about sharing pure energy and sharing pure consciousness. And we will also begin to understand that because matter is made up of coalesced energy, it is not always necessary to physically share that matter. So in terms of a ham sandwich, because that's the analogy that I used, if you wanted to feed someone in another place, you don't have to give them the physical substance of the sandwich. You can broadcast to them the abstract experience of your analog mouth actually chewing the sandwich, and give them the energy and the consciousness experience of that sandwich, if not the physical sensation of it. So now you understand why I do these broadcasts. I am trying to give people on Earth's surface some ideas, some new ideas, like some new examples or templates with which to think, to consider what life would be like and how our lives would be radically changed when we bring together the worlds of pure spirit and pure matter. Your individual experience will be changed and radicalized. How you feed and fuel your body will be changed. How the planet feeds and fuels itself and how the economy is structured will all have to change because we are changing our definition of what physical is. All right? And all of this has to do with, let's talk about ascension. Do you know right now you are ascending? Having listened to this broadcast for 48 minutes, you have raised your energetic frequency. You might have been thinking down at that octave before, but then now we're up here, up here, up here, up here. And look at that. All of our metronomes are now vibrating at this higher frequency because we are thinking about what will happen when we transition into a non-physical state. So in the past, the idea of becoming a non-physical being always included the transitionary experience of death. And I've told you that death is the aberration, death is the membrane that separates two discrete realms, and that ascension is really the way that you move to the next highest realm. And in the graphic depiction of the time vortex at the very, very top, there's a place where the membrane of death doesn't touch the other side. There's a tiny little gap. That gap is the path of least likelihood. It's the one wormhole that is the one timeline that allows you to get out of this level of experience. So when you have effectively refined your consciousness to be in alignment with the core values of who you really are. And those core values, they all end up to be, the distillation is unconditional love, valuing freedom, not only for yourself, but also for others. So personal sovereignty, sovereignty for everyone. They're not just values that I say, those are quote unquote good values, like arbitrary, or because they are my values. In the same way that 90-degree angles help the boxes of our home to actually stand upright effectively, these values are effective values that help you to be shaped in the right way and conforming to the flow of energy and the patterns that it makes when it's flowing. That is like playing the music of the great composer instead of playing atonal, out-of-tune music, and it makes your consciousness continue in its trajectory. When you think thoughts are the evidence of mental friction. And when you meditate and practice mindfulness throughout your day, you are cultivating unconditional love. And that is the beginning of creating the higher faculties. Just like you're a little tiny infant, you have to learn how to use your physical eyes. Everything looks very blurry at first. Learn how to recognize language as opposed to noise, and then figure out what words mean. It is the same thing with higher dimensional perception. You have to cultivate unconditional love, activate your higher faculties, and then even begin to learn to interpret what you are experiencing. This is the journey of consciousness, and we are becoming, mature from being little tiny infants of consciousness. So an infant is quite vulnerable and helpless and can't necessarily control their life trajectory or see where they're going. The goal for each one of us is to become a mature individual, which would be becoming an ascended master. So I don't know, there's a lot of belief system stuff going on in the New Age world, but I'll tell you this. Each one of us has the inner potential to be an ascended master. That's like saying there's a solution to every puzzle, or each one of these puzzles has a picture. What does the picture look like when we put all the pieces together? It's you as an ascended master. And there's not one person that was ever created that didn't have that potential inside of them. It's just a question of reaching that potential through the process of refinement. If you go through the refinery in the correct way, you end up making it to the wormhole and being able to bypass the membrane of death and go into the next highest level of experience. This is the quantum leap, like an electron, an excited subatomic particle jumping from one level of excitation to the next level of excitation. It is literally the quantum leap of consciousness. So how do you, as an individual, begin to perform the flying rainbow lasagna maneuver? The first thing is you need to get information. Just gathering information, like if you're going to build a nuclear reactor, first you have to learn about what atoms are and how they are structured. And then the next thing is find a template, a model for something that you wish to build. So if you want to build a nuclear reactor, find blueprints or find someone else who has already built one. And I am the example of a flying rainbow lasagna. So I can be a template for you energetically, mentally, and in my physical structure. And then you base your own song, your own dance movements on the template. So I do a whole online class all about this. It's called Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans, because it involves drawing, and because it involves a lot of percolation of information. It's really too much for most people to ingest in an hour or even in a weekend. It needs to be given in sensible increments, like sensible digestible portions, and then digested over time. So it's about a 5-month-long class, but you can access the information in a pace that is comfortable to you. All of the information is available on my website at the Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans link. But basically, it starts out with extensive teaching about the shape of your energetic anatomy, the shape of your chakras, the shape of the pattern of energy as it flows in the cosmos. And then what happens when we take that shape and we add an additional dimension to it? What happens when we take this flat piece of paper and we fold it? So we're taking your genes and we are folding them into a new shape. And just like origami, that means that we are now presenting this as a different type of thing than it used to be. And origami means we can choose consciously what we are making it into. So what we are making it into is not just what it once was. Before the genetic degradation of the human code that happened about 10 or 20,000 years ago, because I told you the bodies were originally created not to die, but to ascend and to cellularly regenerate. That was the way we once lived. About 10 or 20,000 years ago, the human genetic code was diminished and degraded, and we have lived in that degraded state for a very long time. At this moment in history, this is when each one of us as an individual has an opportunity to rearrange our genes, reclaim that heritage. It's not just that you can apply the flying rainbow lasagna to the unformed zygotes, your gametes, your sexual reproduction cells in your testes or in your ovaries, and then affect the next generation. That is happening also, and you can affect your own body in this generation and do it in a positive way in order to achieve your full potential. I'm very close to the end of this broadcast, but I'm thinking about that old movie Swamp Thing, where Swamp Thing created an elixir that was made from a special plant, and whenever you drank it, It did nothing more than turn you into your full potential. So Swamp Thing became his, creature form because that was his true potential. Other people became, horrible, violent monsters. I'm not saying that the flying rainbow lasagna will turn you into, a horrible, violent monster. I'm saying that it is nothing more than a tool that you can use to apply to your genetic code and origami or fold your potential into whatever format you wish for it to be. So I, of course, wish for everyone to be free in their mind, to not have anyone speaking to you without your permission or using your mind or your consciousness without your permission. That's the very first thing. Only you should be in your own mind, and you should have full control over what you think and what you ingest and what you emanate. And you should have full control over your trajectory of consciousness. If you could choose, do I wish to smash into a brick wall or do I wish to live a long, healthy life with no broken bones? I think we would all choose the second one. And if we have a choice, by activating our higher faculties, we can actually do that. So now you begin to understand why I say death is the aberration. We were not created to say, hey, should I wake up this morning and, nose my way up to the membrane of death and then narrowly escape? No, you were created to wake up in the morning and say, I'm not going to be on that timeline. That looks like a terrible timeline where I'm going to die. I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to make this choice instead. I'm going to go in this direction instead. I'm going to think these thoughts and emanate these possibilities and then inhabit those possibilities. All of this to understand that we are one entity. We are one entity of consciousness moving forwards and backwards through time, endlessly embroidering the experience, endlessly teaching ourselves by interacting with ourselves. And in the past 5 or 10 or 20,000 years on Earth, it's supposed to be a schoolhouse for learning, but it's been a distorted fun house. A distorted realm where the mirrors aren't real mirrors, they're twisted, and they don't send back what you send out in the right way. Sometimes it's entropically diminished or lost entirely. So it has been very difficult for people to effectively go through the refinery and learn about their consciousness and learn about how what you send out comes back to you and what you should actually be shaped like. So the very first thing in rearranging your genes is, let's get rid of the funhouse distortion. Let's make it a nice, clear place where you can really think and where you can really perceive and where you can really learn. This is a very large topic. Thank you so much for joining me, beginning the process of rearranging your genes, preparing for the birth of a new dimension.